I've just arrived in Melaka on Malaysia's southwest coast, the oldest city in the country. This once important port was ruled successively by Indonesians, Portuguese, Dutch, the British, the Japanese, and then the British again, before Malaysia finally won its independence in 1957. And all those historic comings and goings have made Melaka the most ethnically diverse place in what's already a very multi-ethnic country. The port attracted migrants from China, India, the Middle East, and the Indonesian archipelago. They married among themselves, as well as with the locals and the Europeans, to create whole new ethnic groups. And I'm keen to see whether the racial harmony that Malaysia's so proud of holds up in my ethnically mixed square mile in the historic core of this city. I'll also be looking to explore the impact on Melaka of getting UNESCO World Heritage status 3 years ago. I've visited quite a few towns and cities that have received UNESCO Heritage status in my travels around Southeast Asia and elsewhere. And something I've noticed is that in the core historic zones, often residents and traditional trades and shops have been pushed out to make way for gift shops, restaurants, and boutique hotels. And I'm hoping a similar fate doesn't befall Melaka. I mapped out my square mile to encompass the core historic zone and the settlements of most of the main ethnic groups. I began my exploration on one of the key streets of the historic district, known as Hirin Street or Dutch Street, and within meters found an old building that looked worth popping into. Hi.
Hello, welcome.
It turns out the building is a restored shop come residence dating back to the Dutch era more than 2 centuries ago. After a quick look around, I asked the custodian, Colin Goh, to give us a bit of a tour around the neighborhood.
These are the backs of the house that fronted the streets of Melaka, actually.
The sea was up here?
Yeah.
The sea is now a good kilometer away, thanks to successive land reclamations over the decades. So it completely changed, transformed the...
Oh, very sadly so. Hi, Donald.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Ryan.
Welcome.
This is Donald Tan.
Right.
Ryan.
This is your place here?
Yeah. I was born in this house also. We are about 4th generation. Come to my daughter, the 5th generation already.
Can we take a peek inside?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay, lead the way.
Yeah, sure. I have a couch.
Donald runs a restaurant out of the back of his house.
That's why we have.
Right, well, it's an incredibly long house. How long is your house?
It's about 200 feet long.
200 feet long?
Yeah.
Is that very normal for this type of house?
Yeah, in those days, yes. Myself, my daughter running the...
I learned that narrow houses were a sort of a tax ruse, since the Dutch charged based on the width of the frontage, not the total area.
That's why we have a lot of razors here.
Yes, you do have a lot of races here. It's amazing. I think more than
We live
anywhere
all
else.
in a happily family. Although you have different views on your cultures, on your religion, but still we are always united.
Fantastic. That's a nice sentiment. Like Donald, many of the longtime residents of this street and of neighboring Jonker Street are what is known as Baba Nyonya. From what I understand, these are descendants of Chinese men who settled here under the Portuguese and Dutch and married local women, creating a hybrid culture. As a residential enclave of...
This area was always a bit upmarket, actually, together with Jonkers in our history. There were always traders living on this street, as well as the more genteel people. There are very few traditional trades that remain on the street now. They've either been aged out by acquisition of property, by entrepreneurs and things like that. And also, the Rent Control Act is over, so rentals have gone up.
How much of a concern do you have? It's something I've seen in other UNESCO heritage towns, that this place ends up being sort of losing its life, that people move out, it becomes like a museum rather than a living, breathing place.
As we can see from Jonkers, it was always a street that was half residential and half commercial, and they gelled very well, It wasn't one overpowering the other or what, they supplemented each other. But in the past 10 years or so, Jonkers has gone overboard in commercialism.
That was my concern, and it's something I'm going to be on the lookout for. It looks to me as if on Heron Street at least, there are still plenty of residential homes left. Grand ones too, by the look of it. The other two main streets of the historic district could be a different story.
Hello, boss. What are you making here? What are you doing?
Yeah, we're making the beaded sandals.
Ah, is this a traditional thing here?
This is the Baba Yonia slipper.
Right.
That's a traditional slipper.
I see, right.
But this shoe, they wear just for souvenir, for function, special function.
Special function.
Yeah.
So you're still handcrafting the shoes here?
Handcrafting or handmade.
And how long have you been doing this business?
Oh, 3 generations.
3 generations?
Yeah, it's almost 100 years.
Right,
business.
right. And before I saw it says the bound feet shoes.
Oh, bound feet for the Chinese lady.
Ah.
So olden days, they used to bind their feet from 3 years old.
I know, I've seen stories about it, but you also made those types of shoes?
Yeah. So my grandfather olden days used to make one size for the lady.
Oh.
Just 3 inches only. So now we make just for souvenirs only.
Right.
So this is banned in 1911. So the bound feet, they say the smaller feet, the more beauty.
That's what they thought.
Yeah.
But luckily, someone came to their senses and banned it, so.
The shop owners I spoke with all said they'd seen a healthy jump in tourists and business since the city got World Heritage status 3 years ago. But what about the impact of rising rents and other commercial pressures on traditional trades, residents, and culture in the area? A few meters on, I came upon what turns out to be the oldest Chinese temple in the country. And right across the street, a tiny ethnic Malay kampung, literally village.
Ah, boleh masuk? Ah. I have to remove shoes pretty much everywhere in Southeast Asia before entering homes. Berapa lama keluarga tinggal di rumah ini?
100 tahun ya. 100 tahun.
Berapa?
100 tahun
100 tahun.
di rumah.
Sangat cantik. Siapa catkan dan membaiki rumah ini?
Museum.
Museum apa?
Tu. Museum ni dekat ni apa? Saya tak tahu.
Ah. Dan siapa ini? Not too many houses like this left in Malaysia these days.
Just a couple of blocks from the old temple filled with Chinese worshippers, Muslims were gathering for Friday prayers at what's believed to be the oldest mosque in the country, dating back to the early 1700s. It's built in a distinctive style that looks quite Chinese and isn't seen elsewhere in Malaysia. Our first night in multiracial Melaka coincides with what I'm told is a colorful festival marking the 8th night of Chinese New Year. I learned that it's only celebrated by the Hokkien people, one of several Chinese ethnic groups living in Melaka.
Quite a selection of offerings. Oh my goodness, an entire pig. You folded all this yourself?
Yes, I folded it. These are 2,000 pieces of it as an offering to the heaven god for saving the Hokkien people during the wartime. They hide themselves in the sugar cane plantation, so they make the offering to the heaven god.
Oh, that's why we see the sugar cane outside.
Yes, correct.
And what are you going to do with all the paper?
Afterwards, after midnight, we are going to burn it to the god.
And what are you going to do with all the food? Not going to burn that as well?
No, that is the offering. After that, we will eat it ourselves.
Oh, you have a big
Enjoy
feast.
Big feast, correct.
And this?
This is the misua. This is the long life.
But the noodles?
Yes, noodles.
Ah, okay.
Then afterwards they'll burn all of this? Yes. And the altar?
Technically, firecrackers are illegal in Malaysia, but it's a law that's widely ignored by all the ethnic groups when it comes time for their major festivals.
In part 2, I'm going in search of people doing traditional trades and of unusual ethnic groups. Welcome back to 1 Square Mile in the historic Malaysian city of Melaka. The next morning, I began exploring the main historic commercial street and cross streets, which used to be home to varied trades. I've been warned their numbers are fast dwindling. Melaka is famous around the region for its antique shops. But as I strolled Jonker Street, I found a profusion of restaurants now, as well as a lot of shops selling tacky, generic tourist stuff. Tucked away among them, a rusted old sign stood out.
I'm assuming from the sign that you have been in business for some time.
Yeah, 35 years.
How long?
35 years.
35 years in the same spot.
Yes, yes.
Then what do you think about the changes that have happened to Melaka in the past few years?
Well, I think it's too rapid. And this street is supposed to bring in tourists to look at those antiques and old stuff. But then it has turned into a hawker center.
Walking on, I didn't find any goldsmiths left on Goldsmith Street, but I did find a few more traditional tradespeople.
Ah. Dan nama jalan ini, Jalan Tukang Besi. Berapa tukang besi masih ada di jalan ini? Ada lagi di sini jalan? Dua saja. Oh.
Orang mau lah. Berapa orang tak mau?
Tak mau buat. Tukang tong. So I guess that's these barrels. Hello, hello.
以前啊，我哋擔肥嘅，擔肥擔屎啊！以前啊，做屎桶啊，液桶啊，擔肥擔尿。以前70年代㗎，後邊有攞彎拉屎出嚟擔去倒，裝飯、裝米、裝水。啊，蒸下絲老媽飯，我哋浸腳，有啲大個嘅出邊嗰個大個咧，我哋沖涼嘅。而家淨得我一個，全馬都係我一個人做嘅。
Further on, I stumbled across a shop making accessories for funerals. It's euphemistically called a longevity shop, my Chinese Malaysian cameraman tells me. The Hakka are still another Chinese ethnic group living here. At the northern end of my square mile is another ethnic Malay kampung or village, built almost a century ago. It sits alongside a river and it looks like a real showpiece. I asked how life has changed here since Melaka got UNESCO heritage status 3 years ago.
The status UNESCO.
Sekarang bagus. Dulu tak ada cantik. Jadi bila kata pelancong nak masuk, menteri cantikkan semua bikin barulah. Kamera kan? Kalau siapa buang, siapa bawa apa semua akan nampak. Pergi tempat dia, Airbnb pergi tempat, nampaklah orang tu buang sampah ke apa ke, semua nampak.
From the Malay village, I crossed my square mile to the settlement of a group I've heard of but know next to nothing about. They're called the Chitty. I understand their ancestors were men of southern Indian origin who married locals and that they've been in Melaka for centuries.
I was wondering someone that we can talk to tell us about the Chetty culture. Rajan. Okay, I'll go find him.
One inquiry later, I found Rajan in his house come museum.
Tell me, how many people are there now in your Chetty community?
My Chetty community is about 700 in Melaka. And we got some in Singapore, some in KL. So it's considered about 1,000, less than 1,000.
And what are some of the unique features of your culture? What language do you use? What type of food do you eat?
The unique of this community is that they speak Malay. They doesn't know how to speak Tamil. And they go to temple also, they will speak Malay. They doesn't speak Tamil. All the rites, what they do is Hindu. Only the language they will speak in Bahasa Malaysia.
So it's speaking Malay but doing Hindu rites.
Yes. Okay. The food, we don't take pork and beef.
So you don't take pork like the Muslims, and you don't take beef like the Hindus.
Yeah.
Now many people are marrying outside of the community.
Yeah.
So what do you feel is the future for your community then?
The future of this community, if they don't look into their culture and preserve the culture, that one day this community will no more in this world because of intermarriage.
And the material?
So the Chitty shares some traits with the Baba Nyonya, who were born out of men from China taking local wives and who made a big imprint on Melaka. I wondered what other cultural similarities there might be. Colin Goh from the Dutch Heritage House arranged for someone who would know to meet us at the old Chinese temple I visited earlier.
Hi, Ryan.
Ah, you spotted us, okay.
Yeah.
It's easy with the camera, I don't have to wear a red carnation or anything like that. Joe, nice to meet you.
Yes.
Joe led me to the private family home of the late Tan Cheng Lock.
This is it?
Yeah, this is it.
Tan was a major player in Malaysia's struggle for independence, and perhaps the country's most famous Baba Nyonya, or Peranakan Chinese as they're sometimes known.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And as with most of the Peranakan houses, you know, the first hall would be for the gods, the deities.
Okay.
Yeah. And the ancestral hall will be at the back.
And what would the language of the Baba Nyonya have been?
From the start, it was a mixture of Hokkien, Javanese words, some local Malay words, you know, all that rolled into one, became like a Creole.
Right. I'm just wondering, as time has gone on and as I'm imagining the Baba Nyonya have married Chinese and others, how much under threat the Baba Nyonya culture really is?
More threatened will be the language, you know, because it was easy to preserve the language and the dress and the culture because everybody was staying very close by in these streets. Housing estates came up, you know, the families grew bigger, people start moving away, job opportunities are not anymore in Melaka. So, you know, education and all that, you know, has actually driven people away from, you know, being centered into these two streets, you know. And that's how a community can quickly lose its culture.
There's one more unique Melaka ethnic group I feel I should visit to get a more complete picture of the intermixing this place has produced. They're the Eurasians, or Portuguese as they're known here, a mixture of Portuguese and various local groups. The historic district used to be the heart of that community, and their main church is still in the core area. But I have to venture a few hundred meters, or yards, outside my square mile to visit their current settlement. The day I visit, the Eurasians are holding a festival that appears to involve dousing all comers with water.
They made an announcement asking people not to throw water at the cameraman. I'm hoping that extends to reporters as well. Hi, can I ask you a couple of questions? Could you just, I wonder, can you tell me what's going on here?
Today we are celebrating the feast of Intrudu in this cultural Portuguese village of Melaka. We begin the season of Lent, the season of prayer and penance on Ash Wednesday. So today is the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. It's the last day or last few days for merrymaking.
Can you tell me, your community that's known locally as the Portuguese, do you still speak any Portuguese?
In fact, we do speak the local language of the community, and that's called Cristang. Cristang is actually a Creole language that we have carried on since our forefathers arrived in Melaka. It's a language without a proper written form. Cristang is actually a Creole of Portuguese. So we still speak, but sadly, the young people, the young ones are not so keen in taking up. That's why we have some lessons that we are conducting to encourage the young to pick up the Kristang language, because I think it's important to keep our mother tongue going. It's been around for the last 300 or 500 years, so we hope to go on for another 500 years, you know.
The historic core of Melaka turned out to be even more culturally and ethnically rich than I expected, with all the various groups seeming to get along well together in the narrow confines of my square mile, while at the same time preserving what it is that makes them different in the first place. As for the physical heritage, the buildings themselves should be safe as long as Melaka has UNESCO World Heritage status. But just as there's more to preserving a person's culture and tradition than just hanging on to some old photos of their ancestors, it's a lot more complicated to preserve the culture and character of a place than just to safeguard the buildings themselves.
And that's going to be the biggest challenge for the authorities and for the self-appointed guardians of Melaka's unique heritage.